All right. Well, it's 12:30, so let's kick off. Just want to start off first by thanking the panelists, people that are working in industries and working with us. That I feel really it's worthwhile getting your opinions and just having you part of the uh, this overall program, so that our customers, at least, and those who are interested in warehousing and the whole industry for what that means. And I guess we've tried to sort of give people a bit of an insight into based on the sessions we have today, how we're trying to meet the sort of needs of warehousing and our industry as part of that industry for kind of mentality. I guess in general, we want to get some other opinions from you guys. Obviously, working not just in our specific industry, but across other industries as well, that aligned, and really sort of understand how it all works. So just so I can make sure that everyone's really clear, I guess our definition of Industry 4.0 is, really how business needs to evolve and operate, in the coming era, if you like, in order to grow and survive and basically, be productive and be competitive. From our perspective, it's all about taking, line of business tools and actually, maybe role specific tools and just joining them all together and making sure they're all very interactive, without boundaries and without requiring necessarily, a team of programmers in the back room to make it all happen. That's really where we see the core around Industry 4. So what I'm thinking, Graham, is maybe we could start with you. Actually, before I do that, probably let's just have you introduce yourself and where you're obviously coming from, and Graham, we'll start with you.
Oh, hi. So my name's Graham Hill. I work with a company called Matisk that works in the Microsoft environment. So we work around .NET developing, CRM systems, and obviously ERP systems, and working with Datapel around the WMS.
Yep. Lachlan's obviously joining us as a specialist from Amazon. From Amazon Australia. Appreciate your time, Lachlan. Do you want to just give us a 30-second background on where you're coming from?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Adam. So my name is Lachlan Kidd. I look after the IoT business for AWS, so Amazon Web Services, across ANZ. So I work closely with customers in a whole range of different verticals, mining, heavy industry, logistics and transport, right through to things like connected goods, connected smart devices, and that kind of thing.
Yep, perfect. James, on the by the same vein, James, do you want to just introduce yourself? James from Smart Freight, obviously handling more the logistics and the actual final mile of getting products actually from the warehouse to the end customer. We can see you, James. I think you're on. There you go.
Sorry about that, gentlemen. I've actually just had a couple of little internet glitches.
No problems.
But no, thank you very much for the invitation there, Adam. It's greatly received. And also, good afternoon and welcome to everyone that's on the call. So where are we? Who are we? Smart Freight is a multi-carrier transport management system. We are part of the WiseTech global group of companies. We've got offices in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, South Africa. I think when asked for a simple explanation of what do we do, I just say we put labels on boxes. We ship 58 million items per annum across 16,000 global users, in excess of 650 transport partners. We ship freight to 195 countries with greater than 230 alliance partners. So I think that's where we are. Who I am, James Kinnabara, as the name was already suggested, National Partnership Manager for Smart Freight here in Australia and New Zealand.
Fantastic. Thanks, James. So let's just talk about, what are some of the factors that you're seeing as kind of burning issues you know, that are with your customers and your activities at the moment. And like I said, I want to start with Graham, who sort of basically works with both, you know, small medium business and some of the larger businesses with the Microsoft Financials work, and some of the things that you're seeing that are really striking a chord with the people you're working with at the moment.
Oh, thanks, Adam. We're seeing a massive amount of change going around, I suppose, an intelligent supply chain, and the products that we work with and are provided by Microsoft are becoming increasingly connected, digitally connected, digital technology. So what we're finding is that regardless of whether you've got an inventory system or you're using Office 365, or you're using some of the Microsoft CRM or ERP systems or other systems, that the amount of digital connection between them, and particularly we're finding tools like Power Automate and Power Apps, which are aimed, sort of as Adam was suggesting before, at a very low code, easy to implement, low cost to implement sort of solutions. We're finding those are coming through, and it's changing the way as developers we provide solutions, because customers can create these very specific, very focused solutions to their business process needs that solve sort of you know, bottlenecks or areas of problems. We're also finding that all of these systems, and Lachlan's got the Internet of Things, the sensors, this is all generating data, and we're finding that artificial intelligence, and you've heard the term big data, huge amounts of sensor data coming through where you can actually look at it and make intelligent decisions. So that's affecting us not only in supply chain with machines and manufacturers, but also in things like people providing customer services or services out in the field. The other thing we're finding is that this new world is coming as an OPEX or a subscription basis rather than a traditional on-premise solution. And in fact, a lot of that digital connectivity is native to the cloud or the subscription-based systems. So yeah, I'd say probably intelligent supply chains and digital connectivity is the big thing that's happening, and also the ability for people to do more than they've done previously themselves.
So I just want to jump across to James, and just because you've talked about customer engagement and you've talked about the interconnectedness of things, and I know that you know, Smart Freight has taken a journey from being a traditional back of office warehouse, you know, back of house type sort of solution, and had to really pivot to become now a cloud-based multi-carrier system. But also, as part of that, you know, you obviously deliver information from not only to the customer who is, you know, shipping the good, but to the actual receiver as well. So you've got a broad to deal with, right?
Oh, look, exactly. And I think, you know, echo those sentiments. We sort of see it, it's all about the client or the receiver. They want the goods and they want it now. They definitely want some options. And when I say options, they want some carrier options. Look, it's about efficiencies. There's no hiding the fact that people need to get those goods out of the warehouse ASAP. You know, and visibility, and we talk of visibility around the tracking piece, and then also transparency, and that's what's happening in the warehouse. So, you know, if I take a couple of minutes now, you know, we look at multi-carrier options, you know, the fastest, the greenest, or the cheapest. You know, we need to offer a client a choice, you know, and come check out. They may want it ASAP, which means let's go the fastest, but it's actually going to cost them a little bit more. It might be the greenest, or it could actually then be just the cheapest method because they just want to get it there eventually. But there are people who want it and they want it now. So we expect them to be paying for the fastest service. Yeah, we touch quickly on efficiencies, and I think Graham also touched on that briefly as well. And that is, it's about the system integration from where we are. You know, we're the final mile. So the systems share data seamlessly. So as an example to everyone on the call, DataPearl and Smart Freight, we can integrate via a web service or an API. We can also send data between Datapel, Smart Freight, and back to Datapel, Smart Freight, back to Datapel, all in under 5 seconds. So why do people waste time on rekeying order data? That's crazy. You know, it's automate. We just really need to automate and automate. E-commerce is here to stay, so let's maintain it that way. You also touched briefly, Adam, on the visibility, and that's where we talk of tracking. Customers expect to receive their goods, but they also expect to see and receive some sort of advice. Branded emails, SMS, desktop or tracking alerts via a mobile device is pretty standard nowadays, and it's one of those things that Smart Freight now does, as you've said, out of the box. And the other key point there was transparency. You know, what's happening in the warehouse? Who's buying what products and where are they buying them from? Where are they being delivered to? You know, what are your carriers? You know, how are they performing? You know, their DIFOT services to key areas. Let's not undermine or undervalue or devalue a quality carrier relationship or carrier partner relationship. Don't race to the bottom on the cheapest price. Go for the quality of service, because that's what people are demanding. You know, your warehouse team performance, you know, how are they going? Do you have that ability to see that now? How much are you spending on specific carriers for specific locations or regions? That's really, I guess, probably taking a little longer there. Sorry, Adam, but right. I think they're the key. That's probably the 4 key points that we're seeing as at today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so coming back to what you were saying, and actually going to jump across to Lachlan now, but just on that whole visibility side on supply chain. So you're saying, you know, in some respects, in order to be a leading, you know, carrier system, you do need that integration right from the front end of the process, like you said, to understand, you know, what it is the customer wants. Do they want to bias towards green delivery? Do they want to bias towards the cheapest
Correct.
cost? Do they want a premium experience? I mean, that's kind of reflecting what we were saying earlier on about how people are actually making their choices. You know what I mean? Like they seem to be gravitating towards one end of the spectrum or the other. But just in terms of that whole visibility things, the connectedness from one end to the other. So really connecting the customer's choice to what's going on. Again, that's part of what we do with sharing the data that gives you the visibility into what the customer wants and allows us to transmit that to you, obviously. The other end is, I mean, that's one specific example, but across the whole supply chain, you know, Lachlan and I were talking just briefly the other day about, you know, there's so much. The supply chain is so it can be long, you know what I mean, like physically long and time duration long, but there's a lot of aspects to it that do require monitoring. Graham picked up on the fact there's a lot of data there. You know, Lachlan, maybe you can talk about how Internet of Things actually, what that means, you know what I mean, and in the context of what we're just talking about then.
Yeah, sure. So it's quite interesting. So I look across the Australian business that I look after, and when it comes to warehousing and logistics, if I break those into 2 separate areas, logistics is relatively straightforward. I've got a number of connected, not so much connected vehicle, but really solid vehicle telematics partners. You know, I have no shortage of people who can offer that kind of service. However, when we get into the warehouse, it's actually quite a challenge, and it seems to be this sort of combination of getting sensors that can track fairly small things, you know, in a very large warehouse is actually really hard to do, because there are 3 different dimensions. There's battery life, price, and range. And yeah, you know, there are solutions out there, obviously based around things like RFID, but they have their challenges. We're starting to see the emergence of some new technologies in this space. There's one coming out of the Nordic countries it's got a strange name. It's called WIREPAS, WIREPAS. That promises actually to fix some of these challenges. But yeah, it's actually really hard to put a really cheap, you know, basically disposable sensor that has a decent battery life onto an asset and actually track it in a warehouse. But what we're also seeing is the rise, and the thing I'm really bullish on, because this has so many applications, let me find my prop, find so many applications across not just warehousing, but right through manufacturing, into heavy heavy mining, heavy machinery, heavy industry, that kind of stuff, is this idea of machine vision or computer vision, being able to look at scenes and really intelligently understand, do we have stock? What's in a box? Has what's been put into a box, does that marry up with what's on the barcode? and right through to things like safety, being able to intelligently look at a scene with, say, a forklift operating and understand that while that fork is moving, perhaps there's a 5-meter exclusion zone around it, but once the fork stops, it's quite okay for a human to approach the operator and actually have a chat with them. And that helps get rid of false positives and stops people looking for ways to defeat the safety systems because they get in the way of them doing their job. So yeah, supply chain logistics is a huge area. And I haven't even touched on like specialty areas like things like cold chain. I was just noticing on the news this morning with the talk of this potential vaccine for COVID that it's going to have, you know, a really interesting cold chain applications. Have got to keep it at -80 the whole time. So, you know, how do you do that end to end? There are absolutely ways of doing it, but there's not easy ways of doing it from the pharmaceutical factory through to the doctor's surgery. There's some technical challenges there. So yeah, it's a fascinating area, and we can fix elements of it, and it's not hard to get started. It's actually really cheap to get started in many ways, but there's yeah, lots of different angles to explore.
So let's just talk about the vision side of things for a little bit more, because I think that is an interesting technology, because cameras and you know, machine vision solutions, and Amazon's a great example of where you know, it's effectively creating a service for a lot of these technologies so that people can just utilize these services almost off the shelf, right? So you can literally present an image and then the service will break that image down for you and tell you what's in the image, right? No real programming required, effectively tagging what's in the, like when you look at a phone, tags with people's faces and things like that, giving you the ability to extend your tagging out to assets that you might own in your business, tracking where those things are moving around to, right? So I think you did have sort of a camera or something that that's basically being utilized. Yeah, so that's basically the sort of form factor that we're talking about. The one example that I wanted to pick up on, which is obviously nowhere near as intelligent as what you're doing, but we've had an example from a customer who effectively was utilizing a video surveillance system and actually mounted it above the packing bench so that as things were being pushed through, because they were having a lot of their customers, and this was in the B2C area, saying that they didn't get a particular part of a kit. And so what they were doing was using WMS, they were packing, and of course, when they scan, it was time stamping. What they were doing is when they got a complaint on the product, they were just literally looking at the time code from the scan, going back to the security footage, which they literally mounted above and would be able to play the video and show that the pieces were being put into the box, right? Very simple application, but effectively the IoT that you're talking about, but manually kind of joining the dots, right? Manually joining the time codes up. The other thing is obviously, you know, Amazon's making a lot of strides in like the checkoutless store, you know what I mean? Like, so that's something that you guys have basically got going, you know, commercially operating, right? And is that some of that is around, you know, it's not just vision, right? There's other aspects at work there.
Totally. And look, the amazing thing with the whole space around computer vision is just how quickly, I don't want to use the term commoditized because it has bad sort of connotations, but you know, that's a $20 camera and silicon. So it's not just a camera, it's got some silicon. This is not an Amazon product by any way. This is you buy it online for $20, and with generic software loaded on it, it knows 1,000 different objects, and I can point it at my desk, and you can't see my desk, but it's a complete mess. And it'll actually pick out those 1,000 different objects on my desk and actually pretty accurately characterize them. So then take that idea, and this is what we call a deep lens. This is really a toy. It's designed for playing. You can actually buy these; they're a couple $100s. This is for playing around with exactly what you're talking about. The idea of capturing images and then deploying machine learning, computer vision models onto them and having them accurately identify what it sees. Now, the more specific the thing you're trying to detect, the more work is required to train the model. So it's not completely plug and play at the moment. It's getting more and more productized as we go. But at the moment, you still require quite a few thousand images of what it is you're trying to detect. But once you've got those 1,000 images, you push them to the cloud. It does all the heavy lifting on the crunching the numbers and producing a model. And then we push this model down to a couple of $100 piece of hardware that can then accurately identify the scene you're looking at. And as I say, we see that across safety is a big area. The other key one, I have it up here behind me, I've got a classic gauge that you'd see in, older manufacturing environments. An analog gauge. Normally, a human would look at that once or twice a day, write a value down on a clipboard, and continue on their way. That's dangerous. It's inaccurate, and it produces very, very coarse data. Replace that with a camera that's looking at that gauge every minute, and suddenly I've turned that into a continuous stream of digital data that can be fed into the cloud, can be analysed, can be looked for trends, and a whole range of different, interesting conversations spring from that.
That's a really interesting point, because what we're seeing, particularly in industries that are dealing with food and beverage, chemicals, any production where there's sensitivities to the environment, there's currently in the US, it's actually getting to the point where there are going to be more than just keeping records. There's these things called key data events, KDEs, which are basically coming into play, where customers are going to have systems that basically are auditable systems, where these KDEs are part of a compliance requirement. If you want to deal with food products, you're going to have KDEs on receipt and also on delivery. And that's where, I just want to go back to you, James. That's where I see this interconnectedness again, really becoming part of the equation. So, for example, if you've got cold store or goods that need to be chilled, the KDEs have to be things like on receiving. You've got to be able to show that at the point they were scanned in, there's an associated temperature, and that temperature was maintained. Now, you mentioned that about the COVID stuff as well, but James, how is that going to play into, where you traditionally just had to worry about boxes? Is that something that you guys are considering, or is that someone else's problem? But because it's so closely aligned with what you do in terms of the events that you generate, you almost have a responsibility to be part of that process, right?
Oh, look, correct. And it's an interesting question, but I think I take it slightly differently. And, with the introduction of H&S, with people lifting certain weights, we now have clients printing the actual dead weight of goods on the boxes. So we had, many years ago, we had a medical client that was looking to do exactly that, printing the temperature of when the label was printed and what the temperature was at that point. And there's a number of carriers, and look, we would have to go back to the carriers. Now, our system can't obviously create those scans, but we look back to our source data, and being that of the carrier to say, right, I have scanned it, and I've scanned it into this particular refrigerated vehicle at this particular temperature. So I definitely know that there are the smarts out there, and we definitely do have the available real estate on our labels to capture that information.
Okay.
But there's still data. It's just really realistically from our side, it's just still the data though. It's just data that we need to obtain, and then definitely we can actually print.
Okay. I just want to go back. So just following on from that as well, there's obviously a real push to allow customers to participate in the access of that data as well. And I mean, I've seen systems around where you can, actually look up a code on a product and see, its journey, where it's come from, you know what I mean? From, say, the supplier, or, from your supplier to wherever you've basically picked the product up from. So there's some from, I think these things called like from the farm to the table type sort of tracking, you know what I mean? But in terms of customer engagement and the systems around that, maybe I'm just going to jump across to you, Graham, and talk about, obviously the transition from, traditionally these on-premise ERP systems, and, like realistically, how much work do you find yourself dealing with these days in terms of on-premise systems versus cloud systems? And obviously the requirement for those systems to be interconnected.
We're finding that we've probably got, in the last 12 months, probably one client has chosen to stay sort of on premise with their own servers. We've got the situation now where with some of these cloud ERP systems, we can bring up small business accounting system in the cloud, all configured up, as an out-of-the-box accounting system. It takes us about half an hour. That might have taken us 3 to 10 days in the past. And even enterprise level ERP systems in the Microsoft world, in an hour to 2 hours, we can again spin up what was previously a 4 or 5 server environment that might have taken 2 weeks to create. So we're seeing massive change, and the word commodity was used before. We see this as a commoditized way of actually producing systems, are very different to the way it was before. And when they're out of the box, they're automatically connected with your email systems, and they're displaying out onto the web if you do have your interconnected freight forwarders like James, or if our clients are using some of the smart Internet of Things sensors, we can actually grab data into those things very, very rapidly. So for us, it's a very different world. For clients, it's a lot cheaper and faster to implement some of these really complex solutions now. It's a good time to be out there providing these cloud-based, I'll say commoditized, regardless whether they're customized, but cloud-based systems.
Okay. Yep. All right. Well, look, what I want to do is just do a bit of a wrap up, really. Just this session was really just to explore, how different people who are in, like I said, in aligned industries are sort of, what's happening in their industry. So maybe we can just go around and just have a quick sum up with, what you see as, what are the next steps for the industries that you're working in, how you see those connecting with, the supply chain in general. And maybe we'll just start with you, James. Obviously, like I said before, Smart Freight, really had to pivot quite significantly from being a traditional kind of back of house system in a dusty old corner of the warehouse where someone was banging away on a terminal, just hitting typing in addresses and out came labels. And I remember in the early days going to warehouses and seeing 7 or 8 label printers lined up, each one from a different carrier, and some guy with like software and a KVM switching between different screens because he had to get to different logistics systems. I mean, that has, I would hope that no one is dealing with that now, but that's where we were kind of literally maybe not even 5 years and 6 years ago, right? And so where do you see things going?
Geez, mate, you're showing your age there. I reckon that might have been 25 years ago.
Oh, okay.
No,
Well,
it's okay. No, look, we've obviously offered the multi-carrier software. So we do away with those systems and those carrier systems, which is the big, I guess, is the key advantage there. At the end of the day, WMS, so we have, people like DataPel. We only need where it's going, how many items, and really the dead weight, and we can send it. And that's really what the system's designed to do. You're right. The old system has come a long way. The old different, the monologue screen. We now have the dashboards. We've got reporting. We've got invoice reconciliation to keep those carriers honest. So there, I think, really the exciting times. We've got dashboards that are customizable at a user level and a group level. And this is all the demand, I guess, call it e-commerce, if you will. Has brought along. People just want more from their products that they're using. And we're doing away with those multiple systems and those multiple printers to one system, which then allows that client to only have to focus on one system and train in one system. And then they've got the luxury of that multi-carrier option. And then also, I think Graham was just talking briefly as well, around that hosting. I guess we're lucky now that we've got the ability to, we can actually host it on the client's behalf. We can actually host it within the client's environment. They may say, we want you to on Azure or AWS or any such tool, or alternatively, they might say, we want it in-house. So we've got those abilities and those luxuries now. So I think that's probably the greater leaps and bounds, is the flexibility that we now have. And not to mention the fact, that tracking piece is also really key. People are wanting to see SMS, they're wanting to see branded emails, they're wanting to be tracking those consignments every step of the way.
Okay, so I'm going to throw you a bit of a curly one here. let's talk about the kind of the Uberization of that last mile as well, because I know that in a lot of cases we've got, a lot of our customers might want to, go local, and there's a lot of, and not necessarily have to deal with a large carrier. How are you guys looking at how you can harness that market where you've got that last mile where literally a guy turns up on his bike and picks up the gear and then drops it off, that may only be 5 kilometers away? You know what I mean? Like, is that something that realistically you think is going to be part of your portfolio in the future? I'm not asking you to make any promises, but yeah.
Oh, look, I'll just say yes to everything because I think that sounds awesome. But and I also speak to the guys. It's like, when are we going to get some drones in? I want to have a turn. But at the end of the day, as I was just saying earlier, it's just, we only really need, at the end of the day, the items, how many goods, what are we shipping, and we can put a label on it. In terms of those carrier choices, and let's call it the point-to-point carrier, if you will, like that Uber. I'm sure there'll be one day someone will approach and say, hey, can we actually integrate? And the answer is definitely. And if you look at, there's some other businesses out there such as Sendle, who are also allowing us that flexibility, or that sort of flexibility you mentioned as well.
Okay. So Lachlan, I just want to talk to you just quickly about, just as we wrap up then, what do you see as the gap? Because obviously there's still the technology and being able to put the technology out there, but what do you see as the gap between, I guess, making some of this IoT stuff really accessible to, say, the supply chain?
The gap. Yeah, so I guess a couple of areas. Firstly, it's that hitting that price point, I guess, of what is, how much will someone pay for a sensor, if you will, to track something. Now, if that something's worth $1 million, yeah, they'll pay for it. There's no problems there. That's straightforward. If that something's worth $5, it's a very different conversation. Secondly, it's also the form factor. It's being able to stick something on something. And, the one I get asked about constantly, and again, it is a challenging environment, is tracking shipping containers. Find me something that you can stick on the outside of a shipping container that doesn't get destroyed, and I'll be amazed. That's not made out of metal, because if you know anything about RF, metal is no good for RF. So, and not saying there aren't solutions in that space, there are, but it's that usual argument of how much does it cost. I'm also interested or thinking about the right sort of, this gets complicated quickly, but when I'm inside a warehouse, I track things in a certain way because I probably need sub 5 meter accuracy. When I'm in a van being delivered to a warehouse or out for last mile, I probably only need a couple of 100 meters. When I'm on a ship or an aeroplane, I perhaps need a couple of kilometers. They're all different accuracies, and that implies different price points. It implies different technologies. Suddenly I'm using satellite in one place, I'm using LoRaWAN somewhere else, and I'm using mobile phone technology somewhere else. And that tracking device now becomes quite challenging. It's not a simple, cheap thing anymore. So yeah, there's a few different gaps there. I would encourage people, a couple of areas that I do encourage people is, firstly, in all of these sort of IoT conversations, think about where your data is going and potentially who owns it. Data is absolutely the new oil in this whole thing. And making sure that if you're going down the path of implementing a off-the-shelf solution, that, and especially if it lives in the cloud, be asking that, how do I get access to this data? Because what I see time and again is someone says, oh, well, I need a solution for temperature monitoring. So I go and buy a temperature monitoring solution. Then I need a humidity monitoring solution. So I go and buy one of those too. But now I've just built myself 2 data silos that really the value actually comes from monitoring temperature and humidity together and getting some insights that way. But I've now got 2 silos. So there are some things there to always be thinking about. Where is the data and how do I get access to it? Because what you'll find in the IoT space is people will sell you really cheap hardware, but they own the data because they're subsidizing the cost of their hardware through your data and charging you for the privilege of having reports run or getting access to it and that kind of thing. So there's a few little things there to concern yourself with, but also the other thing I always say to people when it comes to IoT is, do not let perfect get in the way of good. Have a go at something. Think of the one metric in your environment that costs you a lot of money, that makes things unsafe, that causes your customer sat to take a hit, and have a think about what would it look like to fix that, and focus on that one metric. Don't try and boil the ocean. Don't try and instrument everything. There are very cheap hardware solutions out there that you can get going, and with the beauty of the cloud, it costs you nothing to get going with this sort of environment, and you can do some really interesting experiments and prove some really valuable data points out before you have to go and invest even more than $100 in some cases.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, that's I think it's good advice. I think that can be applied to many aspects of change or adding in new processes in terms of business, in terms of a business as well. Like our team obviously talks about progress, not perfection. And that's important, you know what I mean? Always making progress is definitely something to bear in mind. Graham, I just want to wind up, just end up with you on this one, and just kind of frame things a little bit more. You know, obviously what we've seen in the industry is, the bigger players, the big end of town, Microsoft, really starting to play down the chain towards the smaller businesses with their systems, delivering a lot more functionality that used to be the domain of large business. We've actually, in some respects, seen the smaller end of town, or that middle section, actually, everything seems to be following this divergence where we've got people sort of not wanting to play in kind of the Joe average territory. They either want to be a very simple product, so vis-a-vis the zero. And where you've got products like MYB who were kind of well featured and functioned horizontally, starting to lose their way. Can you just comment on just generally what you're seeing from both ends of the spectrum there?
So an interesting thing has happened with the cloud. You can be a BHP, or you can be a one-person startup, and the tools that you might use are the same tools. So for small to medium-sized businesses now, they've got available in their arsenal of tools that they can get in the cloud, very functional tools that almost democratize some of those capabilities. So just coming back to, I suppose, what the tone of today, Industry 4 for me is digitally connected technology, devices and processes, producing an intelligent supply chain. And the other thing that we're getting out of this, and we're getting the information that's coming from James into Datapel's WMS, or from Lachlan's IoT sort of information, is we've got the ability at a very low price point to get insights in both customers, suppliers, our service requirements, what our supply chain is doing. So it's an interesting time for us as sort of service and software providers, where customers can come to us and they can get almost best of breed at a very, very low price. It's a very interesting time.
All right. Look, I appreciate that we're starting to get close to the end of the time, and I wanted to leave a space for the attendees to pose any questions that they might have. I think you should have access to a Q&A section or a chat section or something like that. If anyone does have any questions they want to ask any of the guys here, probably now, or myself, now is the time to do it. I probably should have given you a heads up a little earlier. So, so if you'd like to put any questions in, please feel free. If after the session you all of a sudden you have a light bulb moment and you decide you do have some questions, please feel free to just email through to Robe, and we will definitely make sure that they get routed to the right person and you get your response back. So right now I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, do have a question. Has anyone integrated Microsoft Teams with WMS? That's obviously probably more specific to me, maybe to Graham as well. Certainly, with the new feature around the Zapier, I know that obviously Asana is like a task management system that can be integrated. I haven't checked whether Teams is actually on the list of apps and that's something that we could definitely do. But like I said, there's a lot of apps on the Zapier platform. For sure, if you were to look at going into the coming year, with the app flow, I think it's called app flow, correct me if I'm wrong, Graham, but that's something that we'll be looking at as well. And Power BI, if you're connecting with the WISE accounting system and WMS, which is an option, which currently is basically an option for our customers going forward. Obviously that's a bigger system, so it's not a just a hook up overnight type sort of solution, but that is actually the idea behind that was to basically create a whole Microsoft environment which brings in Teams, Office 365, CRM, and obviously at the core of it is I think it's Dynamics basically. Correct me if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, so in terms of Teams exposes interfaces to us to work with as developers, but probably more importantly, as Adam said, it used to be called Flow. It's now called Power Automate. It's sort of like Zapier on steroids, and you can do a lot of your own changes, but that is actually available. And the great thing about the Power Platform is the last time I looked, there was about 320 different connectors available to packages out there in the marketplace. And Adam, obviously with the Datapel WMS and other systems, they've actually underneath the scenes got SQL and web services. So it should be possible to integrate Teams with WMS. And in fact, Adam and I were talking about this the last week or two and about how we might plug that in, or what customers might use. So yeah, it's very interesting. And I see that somebody's actually put a comment that Teams is available by Zapier.
Yeah, so that's great. One of the teams basically just checked that out, and that it is definitely available. Obviously, how deep it is obviously that's the question. But I think where we're at now, I think what's interesting is that in all the domains that you guys work in, we're all heading in the same direction, and I think we're all on the cusp of really sort of delivering this sort of integrated app flow, if you like, to use your terminology there, Graham. Sorry, I'm stealing that from to use that terminology. We're actually really all starting to just understand the benefits now, and I think what I'm really excited about is how we're all going to see this play out over the next couple of years, and how businesses can actually now really start to work on the business and flow and have the data literally flow from one team to the other and keep everyone connected. And I think that's a really exciting time for where we're at, and we're actually really looking forward to seeing what we can build out with that whole thing. So I think we're going to leave it at that. So I really appreciate everyone's again, panelists. I thank you guys for giving up your time today and joining me. It's really been a really interesting session, so I appreciate that. So we're going to end it there. As I said, if anyone does have any questions afterwards, please feel free to email our team. Just wrapping up, I want to thank everyone for joining us for this this format of Replenish from 2020. It's as I said, why didn't we innovate like this before? Who knows? I think we all got complacent. We shouldn't need a reason to basically be innovators and do that as part of just our general business operations day to day. So thanks for everyone attending all the sessions today. We will endeavour to get these recordings out, make them available for people as well. And we look forward to, we're definitely going to be doing things in person at some stage, but we feel that we're going to basically continue doing this as well. So look forward to the next time we can all join up together. And thanks again, panelists. We'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much for having us. Cheers.
All right.
Thanks.
a lot.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.